If you are able, please stand and remove your cap as we honor our country with the singing of the national anthem, performed by Miss Jean Dean.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Peer Support Specialist and United States Marine Corps veteran, Adonai Silva.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now, a word from Chaplain Ross.
Hello, everyone. I'm here at our new but currently unfinished sacred space located at the ACC 2 Charlie, so second floor of the building, East Wing area. It's a place of prayer, reflection, and meditation, as you see on the signage overhead. And this is for veterans and staff alike. And I want to thank you so much for your support in recognizing the need for a space for God in this building, as well as in your lives. And we look forward to furnishing this space and dedicating this space and having you back in the ACC building and main hospital as well to utilize this space as soon as possible. And I invite you right now to bow your heads with me in a time of prayerful reflection. Now, in our gathering together for our 2020 Mental Health Summit via VVC, as most individual appointments and groups have been done in this way, we want to first pause to recognize that 20 per day veteran suicide rate that is really 22 a day if we include active duty military, and that this has not gone away, even though we don't hear about it much in the headlines or in other things that are going on, but it's still very much present. And we also recognize how isolation, loneliness, and mental health issues may be heightened for many. And the unconscionable event that took place on, of all days, Memorial Day, seemed to have somehow unmasked all of the darkness of our country's past and has brought our nation to a place of greater introspection and internal change, as it's also added to the issues of mental health. Now, many years ago, a veteran that I provided spiritual care to also blessed my life in sharing of his wisdom with me. This quote that he shared with me that I'd like to share with you also today, I hope that it blesses your life and gives you comfort that helps you deal with the current crisis. He said that nothing changes until the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of changing. Now, as you reflect on that, I want to add also that during these challenging times, may you also find comfort in the healing words of President Abraham Lincoln, who in his second inaugural address of March the 4th, 1865, said these words, which to some may also sound like a prayer, that the people of our nation and its veterans need to hear just as much today as they did then. He said, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, and to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and a lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. Amen. And God bless you. You can come and check out the sacred space again in this ACC building as you return to the VA in the very near future, and also check out the chapel over at the main hospital. I mentioned that earlier. It has been renovated, and I think you're going to like that change as well. God bless you and keep you.
Hello and welcome to our 8th annual Mental Health Summit. My name is Garndeep Saran and I'm the Medical Center Director at the VA Loma Linda Healthcare System. At the beginning of this year, we had no idea what it had in store for us. An economic downturn, increased awareness of social injustice, and now the wildfires. It's been a challenging year for everyone. I know for me personally, it has been mentally taxing, as well as for my family, my friends, my neighbors, my colleagues, our patients. And I know in March, it was a very difficult time because there was the unknown. It required us to pivot to virtual means of healthcare. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is our mental health program here at VA Loma Linda. 100% of our mental health care can be delivered using VA Video Connect. Our providers have embraced that technology. We do the 4th highest number of VA Video Connect appointments in mental health across the VA healthcare system. And VA is the largest healthcare system in the country. It's one of the modalities that has allowed us to be there when our patients need us the most. You can use a smart device to connect with your provider. If you need to make an appointment, you can send a secure message through My Healthy Vet, you can call our call center, or if you're in crisis. We are still seeing patients face-to-face at our ambulatory care center, at our community-based outpatient clinics, or in our emergency department here at VA Loma Linda. I'm sure you'd agree with me that the words veteran and homeless and veteran and suicide should not be in the same sentence. This requires us to take a community-based approach. And that's why I'm so glad you're here and participating in our Mental Health Summit, because it's an opportunity for us to share the resources we have available, as well as the resources that are available with our community partners. Because the only way we're going to get through this is by getting through it together. Thank you for taking the opportunity to participate in the summit, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to care for you.
Hello, my name is Michael Potasniak, and I'm the Associate Chief of Staff for Mental Health at the Loma Linda VA, and I recently transferred here from the San Francisco VA. I'm an Army veteran with 2 deployments, most recently to Afghanistan in 2016. I was also an Army psychologist and a VA psychologist, so I know firsthand how our soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and coasties have struggled to get the help that they need in the field and when they get home. This is an unprecedented time in mental health as a field, but I am proud to say that Loma Linda VA has maintained the same level of services. It's hard on our veterans and providers to not be able to have as many face-to-face sessions, since therapy is very difficult with a mask. We have responded by providing all of the care we used to over video. We have maintained crisis in-person walk-in sessions, and our inpatient psychiatry unit is open, and our social work services in the emergency department are working at capacity. Our suicide prevention team has been on site and has been assisting veterans who are experiencing crises. Our homeless social work teams have also remained on site and in the field, helping our most vulnerable population find the housing that they need. In summary, Loma Linda Mental Health is open for business, and we are here to serve you virtually and in person. And I am proud to say we are completing the same amount of appointments as we did prior, even if the form of it has changed to virtual in some cases. Thank you for partnering with us and joining the Mental Health Summit for 2020. We cannot stop veteran suicide without you.
Hi, I'm Madison Yeo, social worker and team lead in our Mental Health Access Clinic. Were you aware VA Loma Linda has a same-day mental health clinic? The Access Clinic is here to provide care for urgent but non-emergent mental health needs on a walk-in basis. Our clinic is not designed to be a long-term solution, but rather bridge any gaps in services, address urgent issues that cannot wait for upcoming scheduled appointments, and even help veterans get established or reconnect in VA mental health. Veterans who want our services and feel as though they don't have a safety concern, such as suicidal thoughts or homicidal thoughts, they're encouraged to reach out to the contact center at 909-825-7084, extension 5085, and they'll be referred to our clinic.
Hi, my name is Heidi Kraft. I am very, very pleased to be with you today to talk about some things that we know now about suicide prevention in our military and veteran communities. This This relates to all of us, whether we are active duty or veterans ourselves, or family members, or caregivers, or healthcare providers who are in the business of taking care of our country's heroes and their families. I hope that this presentation will have a little bit for everyone, and I'll hopefully be able to share with you what we know about what works, because I think we all really want to be part of the solution. And so I'm really pleased to be with you today. Again, my name is Heidi Kraft. I am a clinical psychologist, and I spent a little over 9 years on active duty in the US Navy. During that time, I worked as both a clinical psychologist and a flight psychologist, which meant that I took care of aviation squadrons. And I had the unique experience and privilege to be able to fly in a lot of our Navy and Marine Corps aircraft, including the F-18, which was my favorite, of course, by far. My experience is one that I would not trade for anything in the world, despite the fact that my deployment to Iraq was very tough and had a lot of difficult times attached to it. It was also the best time in my life, sort of this juxtaposition of the best and worst time at the same exact moment. I think combat is kind of a unique experience in that way, that a lot of people would agree with me has really intense, interesting moments. One of them is the people that you serve with, and those to our left and our right, the people that we would die for, that we would give our lives to protect. This was made very, very clear for me during my experience with a combat hospital, which is, of course, what I was doing in Iraq with the Marines. I was part of a surgical company. This was back in 2004. And obviously, that was very beginning of the counterinsurgency, and things were pretty intense and very dynamic, and our surgical company cared for a great number of casualties. It was a difficult and amazing time to be part of a Marine Corps surgical company. Part of what I have taken from that experience is relationships. And some of those relationships were some of the strongest friendships I've ever had and probably ever will have. They are people that I don't need to say anything when I'm with them. We just sit together, and we can say a lot without saying anything at all. Very, very meaningful, very wonderful, intense relationships. One of those people that I still consider one of my dear friends today was a Marine named Kat. She was our executive officer of our surgical company, and she is an incredible Marine. She had been enlisted before she became an officer, and she had that Marine thing about her that was so incredible. Our Marines in our surgical company, and a lot of our sailors as well, they would have followed her anywhere. And she was really a junior officer when we deployed together. I'm really proud of her. She's put on lieutenant colonel since, and she's still in active duty. She's in a command position, and I've been following her career with great joy and pride, and watching how amazing she has done. Kat was married to another Marine officer, and he was deployed at a different part of Iraq when we were deployed, but we had a chance to meet him a couple of times. They had served for a long time together and had an awful lot in common. He was lovely. When we returned from our deployment, she reached out to me a couple of times, and she told me that she was worried about him, that he had really struggled with a lot from his deployment, and seemed like he was fighting demons. I remember her kind of saying it that way. She was worried about a lot of the symptoms that he was showing. I offered back then to have him come and see me at the hospital there. on the Marine base. I was a provider at the hospital. And, because I didn't know him very well, he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to see me, and I offered to get him hooked up with someone else. I offered to have him come in civilian clothes. I offered to just go for a walk with him and just talk. He didn't want to do any of those things. He was really concerned that seeking mental health support for him would mean the end of his career as an officer. There was a lot of stigma back then. It's better now. It's still around to some extent, but it was a lot worse 16 years ago. So that's part of the good news. Anyway, Kat deployed again about a year after we got back, I guess, year and a half. And I remember it was on the Marine Corps birthday in November when I got this message from her on my cell phone, and I was surprised because I knew she was still in country, so I didn't understand why she was calling me on her cell phone. She was home. She had been, she was home on emergency leave because her husband had taken his own life while she was gone. It's one of those stories, and many of us who have served have them. It's a story that has made me second guess myself as a friend, as a therapist, as an officer. Like we should have been able to find a way to make this different. We should have been able to save him. It's still with me every day that I should have done something else. And it's part of what informs my being with you today, to present to you what we know about military and veteran suicide and a few very important evidence-based things that we can all do to make a difference. So let me start with a couple of quick stats for you. Suicide in our country is one of the leading causes of death across the board. It's considered a public health crisis, zero doubt about that. It doesn't discriminate. Age, rank, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, it seems to affect us all at some level. Most of all, it's preventable. What we know about suicide in our military and veteran population is a couple of things that are also pretty worrisome. Veterans make up 9% of our US population at any given time. They make up 18% of current adult suicides. So you can see there's a disproportionate number of veterans who are taking their own lives. Why? Well, there's a number of risk factors that are pretty specific to our culture. And when I say culture, I mean the veteran world as a culture. It is a culture, and we do have our own beliefs and values and even language that makes us very specific. There are cultural beliefs that play into this, and part of those include those that you heard in my story. The belief that seeking help for a mental health issue, a mental health challenge, is something that indicates weakness, something that might harm your career, something that should be avoided. That's a military cultural belief. And like I said, it's getting better. That's the stigma that's involved. It's getting better, but it's still a significant concern, and it's still a part of why we worry about veteran suicide. There are other cultural beliefs as well, but they include this idea of being other-focused, of needing to think about ourselves as those that run to save other people, that do the country's bidding, but that don't often turn our focus and our emphasis to ourselves. Finally, and probably most importantly, the access to lethal means seems to be a veteran-specific phenomenon. We, in our culture, we have more access to firearms. We tend to own firearms much more than our civilian counterparts. We know how to use them. And firearms are by far the most lethal of the ways that people attempt suicide. So being that that's a cultural phenomenon in and of itself, that veterans have access to firearms and tend to have them in their homes, does put the culture, the whole group, at an additional risk. A couple things that are very important to understand, no matter who you are or no matter how you interact with this culture. Asking someone about his or her intention to die by suicide will not put that person at risk for suicide. The question is straightforward, it's simple, and for many people it's very scary, but it is the question to ask, and it should be asked like this: are you thinking of killing yourself? I realize many of you find that really frightening to even think about saying those words, but I promise you, we know this to be true. It is important to ask straight on with someone and get a direct answer back. There's a couple other things to know. Limiting lethal means will lower a person's risk to die by suicide. Suicidal crises are what we call that time when suicidal thinking kind of meets action. What we seem to know about suicidal crises is that they are much, much shorter than we used to think they are. Sometimes they're as short as 5 minutes where a person's thinking gets really constricted and the person isn't thinking logically or rationally at that moment at all. In that time, that's the time where it's the most important to have access to that lethal means not be available, because during that crisis, that's not when someone is thinking clearly about it. So if we can ensure that whatever that person has as far as lethal means is contained or is gone at that point, we can save lives. This is now becoming more and more accepted. We're very, very sure that this is the case. We know a couple of things. People who have one access to lethal means removed do not go on to find another way to die. And people who survive a suicide attempt do not go on to die by suicide. So we've sort of learned that this is an important time to intervene, and limiting lethal means seems to be one of our most important things that we can possibly do to help save lives. A few other things just to know, kind of myths to bust, if you will. Even people with loving families, with children, with plans for the future can be at risk. We know that social support is protective for those people. We know that their thoughts can be irrational. And so it's very important as a member of that person's support system in any way that you listen. Listen completely to what that person is saying and believe that person. It is, in fact, what we all can do. Do not need to be a mental health provider in order to allow that kind of caring, empathic ear that can make a difference between life and death for someone. We also know that people who do feel these suicidal crises, they often communicate their distress. So take all comments about suicide intent and plan very, very seriously. They are medical emergencies. So if you are with that person, if you have asked the question and you have received a direct answer that the person is in fact thinking about or planning suicide, this is a medical emergency. Stay with the person and get help. A couple of important things to share with you here. Not just the myths and facts, but also some resources that we have. There's a really great new body of literature that came out of the University of Utah, where Dr. Craig Bryan was heading up the Center for Veteran Studies there. He is really the country's expert in suicide prevention in veterans. He is now at Ohio State, still one of our collaborators at PsychArmor Institute, and he and his colleagues developed what is called the Crisis Response Plan. It's basically an index card that you can sit with, and you don't have to be a mental health provider to do this. You can sit with a veteran that you love and come up with the answers to these 5 pieces here and write them down on an index card. The best way to do it is to actually have the veteran write it down. So basically, we're asking for warning signs, and people tend to know some of their warning signs, strategies that they have used for managing when things get stressful. People may have a variety of things that work for them: meditating, taking a walk, listening to music. Usually, if we talk to people about this, they tend to know. Sources of social support. This can be anyone from family, friends, providers, support groups. Reasons for living. This seems to be the big one, that people who write down a couple of their really important reasons for living, having that on that index card that they can then look at when things get stressful, seems to be a big part of creating that optimism that is so protective for people in suicidal crises and tends to get kind of clouded in that moment of cognitive constriction. And finally, professional assistance. This is where you're going to list 911, the Veterans Crisis Line, and your doctor's name and number. I have a clip from one of our courses here where Dr. Craig Bryan is describing the crisis response plan. PsychArmor has a number of courses on suicide prevention, some for providers, some for caregivers, some for all of us in the general community. This is a good one where Dr. Bryan describes the CRP and how to actually develop it with a veteran that you care about.
Hello, and thank you for joining me to discuss a critically important topic. My name is Dr. Craig Bryan. I'm a board-certified clinical psychologist who specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm an Air Force veteran. It is important for everyone to understand a little about those things that put people at risk for suicide, as well as those things that protect them. This information can help every one of you be part of the solution. Someone who can help save the life of a veteran, or his or her family members. The good news is that there are also things that protect people from dying by suicide. These are just as important to know as risk factors. One of the most powerful things that protect people from dying by suicide is optimism. For many people, the ability to find positivity or hope in a situation is connected to finding a reason to live. Other protective factors include social connectedness, coping skills to be used when things get challenging, and access to mental health care.
To learn more, please visit our suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention courses at psycharmor.org.
So that's just a snippet from our course on the CRP. I'm going to try to, there we go. It is actually short, it's interactive, it helps, I think, introduce the CRP and how all of us could actually use it if there was a veteran in our lives that we wanted to just have that additional protective factor for. The CRP is based in a lot of evidence now. Dr. Bryan and his colleagues have really proven that it reduces suicidal ideation and suicide attempts in veterans. So the literature just continues to grow. It's very, very powerful tool. So think about checking out that course if you'd like to learn more. I have a little bit more here for you, a couple other resources for everyone. One is a course that we have called Helping Others Hold On, where again, Dr. Bryan helps us think about some practical tips about how we all have a part to influence other people. There's some really compelling research with suicide survivors in which those folks were asked, what was going on in your mind as you were heading towards that suicide attempt? And there's this kind of common theme among many of them that they say, I was trying to make eye contact with people. I was trying to engage with people as I was walking to that bridge or as I was coming home. And if one person had just made eye contact with me, had just smiled, had just said hello, I probably wouldn't have attempted it. It's really very compelling, and it plays into this particular course called Helping Others Hold On, where Dr. Bryan actually talks about how most people who end up in a suicidal crisis are ambivalent about actually wanting to die. Most people do not want to die. They just want the pain to go away for a little while. And so how very important social support is, how very important optimism is, and meaning and belonging, and how we each of us individually can make a difference in those factors for people in our lives. This is a clip from our course,
It's almost like
Helping
they
Others
find
Hold On.
themselves on a seesaw, where one side is a desire to live and the other side is wanting to end the pain. The good news is that for the vast majority of people, the desire to live is easier to tip on the ambivalent scale. In other words, a small amount of wishing to live can offset a large amount of wishing to die. That's where people in their lives come in. Sometimes we are able to influence that wish to live in people who might be ambivalent and might be fighting that seesaw. We can tip the scale and help their desire to live win this inner battle. As a volunteer, you have the opportunity to affect someone's life in a positive way, to be supportive and understanding and empathic on a day that he or she might really need that scale to be tipped.
To learn more,
That's just a little piece from...
It's almost like they...
Sorry. That's a little piece from Helping Others Hold On, which it's one of our older courses in the suicide prevention. I think it's in suicide prevention. It's also in our volunteer portfolio, but it is a really unique course in that Dr. Bryan kind of takes us through what all of us actually have to offer individually, one-on-one, where we can really make that difference in helping people get exactly that one connection, that one piece, that one little bit of optimism that might help them through that crisis. So another really good kind of resource for people to realize that we all have a lot of power in this, in making a difference for people just by our interactions. Another resource that we all have here, those of you that are connected with the VA might be very familiar with SAVE. SAVE is a course that we did in partnership with the VA, and it is specifically set to know the actual signs of someone who might be entering a suicidal crisis, and then knowing how to act in order to be able to help save that person's life. SAVE is an acronym that is developed throughout the course. It's a short course narrated by a psychologist who used to be in charge of suicide prevention for the whole national VA. Every one of us can intervene in this way. I think my clip, she actually goes through what SAVE stands for, but I'll go over it afterwards if she doesn't.
Think SAVE to remember the important steps in preventing suicide. S is for signs. Learn to recognize the signs that indicate someone may be thinking about suicide. A is for ask. Ask the most important question of all. V is for validate. It is crucial to validate the veteran's experience and make him or her feel understood and supported. E is for encourage and expedite. It's important to encourage veterans to get treatment and to expedite them getting help. Let's go through each of these steps in more detail. S is for signs. There may be several signs or clues that you can observe in veterans' thoughts, feelings, and behavior that a veteran is considering suicide and needs our help. Hopelessness. This is feeling like there is no way out. Anxiety, agitation, insomnia, or mood changes. Feeling there is no reason to live. Rage or anger. Increasing alcohol or drug use. Withdrawal from family or friends. In addition, any of the following signs require immediate medical or emergency intervention. Thoughts of hurting or killing him or herself. Looking for ways to die. Talking about death, dying, or suicide. Self-destructive or risk-taking behavior, especially including alcohol, drugs, or weapons. A is for ask. It is vital that we all know to ask the most important question of all. Are you thinking about killing yourself? Some things to consider. Do ask the question whenever you have seen the warning signs we've discussed here. Do ask the question in a natural way. Let it be part of the conversation as if it were a natural thing to talk about, because it is. This reduces stigma and helps the veteran feel more comfortable talking about it with you. Please don't ask the question in a way that sounds like you're expecting a no answer. For instance, "You aren't thinking of suicide, are you?" Please don't wait to ask the question until the veteran is, or you are, leaving. Give yourself time to talk about this. It's that important. Other things to think about. Stay calm. Listen more than you speak. Make eye contact and keep it. Look confident. Don't argue with the veteran. Let your body language be open and comforting. Make your comments encouraging and supportive. And be honest, this is a difficult situation and the answer is not a quick fix, but there is help available. V is for validate. Validate the veteran's experience. Talk openly about suicide. Listen and allow the veteran to talk, no matter what he or she is feeling. Acknowledge that the situation is serious, but do not judge. Reassure the veteran that help is available and you will help him or her find it. E is for encourage treatment and expedite getting help. What should I do if I think a veteran is suicidal? Do not keep it a secret. Do not leave the veteran alone. Try to get the veteran immediate help from his or her doctor, from the nearest ER, or from 911. Reassure the veteran that help is available. You can call the Veterans Crisis Line at 1-800-273-8255. Press 1 for veterans. Text the Veterans Crisis Line at 838-255 or visit veteranscrisisline.net and click on the upper right corner of the screen to enter the confidential Veterans Chat. The responders at the Veterans Crisis Line are there to serve all veterans and anyone who is trying to help a veteran. Please provide this number to any veteran or friend or family member of a veteran. A few important safety issues to cover. Never negotiate with someone who has a gun. Please get to safety and call 911. If the veteran has taken pills, cut him or herself, or done harm to him or herself in some other way, call 911 immediately. Here are some important resources to know about.
Okay, so that was a clip from SAVE, which is one of our really kind of most popular courses on suicide prevention because, as you can see, it goes over very specific things that we all can remember. And it's not just for providers, it really is for all of us in our ability to just remember we have to ask the right question. Notice the signs, ask the right question, be there and understand and validate the person, and then help that person to get the assistance that he or she needs. Really SAVE is pretty instrumental in helping people save lives. I've gone over just a couple of PsychArmor's courses that are there to support all of us in our attempt to be part of the solution that has become this epidemic of veteran suicide. I hope I've maybe gone over a couple of myths that will, so that you know a little bit different information. Maybe you have a little bit different viewpoint on this and you realize how very important you are in your role, whatever that role might be, whether it's a comrade or a friend or family member, caregiver, healthcare provider, however we interact with someone who might be needing our help, we really can be the difference. We can change everything for a person who is right on that verge of entering a crisis. And we can make a difference in saving people's lives. Thank you for your outstanding help and care of the veterans in your lives, whoever they might be. And thank you for your time today. Please join us at PsychArmor for free education to continue to expand your knowledge about this. And together we can really make a difference in this. Thank you so much for your time and for all that you do.
Good morning. Riverside and San Bernardino counties are two of the largest counties in the nation. Many veterans in these two counties live out in rural areas. Often, these veterans have far less resources than those living closer to the city. One such area is the high desert town of Barstow, California, and the many smaller communities around Barstow. This desert town is approximately 75 miles from the nearest VA hospital. One of the ways that we are trying to meet the needs of rural veterans is through the Barstow Community Coalition, which works with the VA through the High Desert VCOT, Veteran Community Outreach Team. Coalition members coordinate with VA teams in an effort to meet the needs of and support veterans. Veterans in the area have received assistance with housing, mental health crisis, education, domestic violence, and even with finding recreation peer support groups. If you would like more information or would like to join the High Desert VCOT, simply contact the Barstow Community Coalition. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Riverside Mayor Rusty Bailey, and it's an honor to be with you, albeit online. I'm both glad and I'm upset to be talking with you today about veteran homelessness. I'm glad, on one hand, to have an opportunity to bring attention to this very important issue, which is very close to my heart. I'm also glad to be able to share some encouraging news about successes we've had in Riverside with getting our veterans off the streets. More on that in a bit. But I would be remiss if I did not speak up on how upset I am that veteran homelessness exists at all. As you may know, I'm a veteran myself, having served in the U.S. Army before coming home to Riverside to teach and eventually run for public office. So I know a few things about veterans, and some of the things I know about their struggles are very difficult for me to reconcile with in terms of my love for our great country. Veterans are committed to the idea of service, to something greater than themselves. They know how to sacrifice for the common good, whether it is for the person on the front lines, in the armored vehicle, or in my case, in a helicopter. This rings true to me, not just because of my own military service, but also because I was raised that way in a family that's been in Riverside and serving our city for more than a century. In the military, the mission is everything. You've heard that before, haven't you? We need to make it our mission as Americans, now, to end homelessness amongst our veterans. There is no excuse for the men and women who have served their country so valiantly, many in conflicts abroad, to come home to America and live on the streets or in their cars or on a park bench. Too many veterans in America are living, make that surviving this way. Some are struggling with PTSD, some with substance abuse, some with other forms of mental illness. And that's what your summit is all about. Some are estranged from their families and from their military comrades, and that's not a good place to be. And they need our help, and we are honor bound to help them. Here's the good news. The good news is this, and we have been able to house all our veterans in Riverside who accept services, who accept housing. We took up the challenge, the mayor's challenge to end veterans homelessness from President Obama at the time, and we succeeded for the time being through a great deal of work by staff in the city, county, Loma Linda, and our homeless outreach workers all across the city. We've worked hard to stay at functional zero ever since then, meaning if someone needs a house that's a veteran, we can get them into a house within 30 days. Yes, the homeless population is always changing. And yes, try as we might to stop it, that population could increase as a result of the economic turmoil. So there are people, including veterans, becoming homeless all the time. But we've made a commitment to get our homeless veterans into shelter and permanent housing. It's not an easy mission we've accepted, but it has been worth it. Obviously, it's worthwhile. One thing I learned in the military was that we are never stronger than when we are working as a team toward a common goal. So, I encourage you to find allies in your circle of influence who understand the importance, the imperative of getting our veterans off the street and into shelter as soon as possible. That means stability for them and for our city. I'd be remiss if I did not mention that for some of these veterans, this is a matter of life and death, just like war. From the hundreds of homeless individuals with whom I've interacted, including countless veterans, I can tell you that there are many pitfalls for these folks, our brothers and sisters on the streets on the way back to self-sufficiency. One of them is mental health. and the ever-present threat of a crippling depression. I've spoken to many veterans who are deeply ashamed of having seen their lives spiral from one of proud service to their country to an existence that is just above survival. So, we need to talk about it. Suicide prevention as an additional reason to work with our homeless veterans, to let them know we understand their struggle and that we want to help. Getting a veteran off the streets is often a life-saving event. And for people who have risked their lives for us, it is a challenge we must accept and overcome. You know, and I know, that suicide is preventable. And I've learned a lot through an effort called REACH, which is an effort of the Rally Point team. You can Google that and check that out on your own. I've learned that veterans, especially those with combat experience, often are dealing or have dealt with some of the risk factors that lead to suicide, including chronic pain, chronic health concerns, a recent loss, such as the death of a friend, a coworker, a family member, and having suffered multiple traumas at the same time. I've also learned that veterans can benefit from some of the protective factors that keep individuals from committing suicide, such as a sense of connectedness and belonging, effective problem-solving skills, having a sense of mission or purpose, and being in good physical health. That's where you come in. I encourage you to educate yourself on the challenges facing our veterans. Most of all, if you are concerned about someone you know, encourage them to reach out and call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. And if they're a veteran, they press the number 1. They can also chat online at suicidepreventionlifeline.org/chat. As you may know, I'm winding down my last 4 months or so of public service here in the mayor's office. Come December, I will hand the reins over to a new mayor. My next job, really my next passion, will be in leading a nonprofit organization that helps homeless individuals get off the streets. It is not an overstatement to say that I feel a calling to do this. I'm committed to helping the least, the last, and the lost among us, our neighbors without homes. And I'm certain, unfortunately, that at least some of these individuals will be veterans, struggling to overcome what has become the issue of our day. And so I look forward to helping them, to working with you, and to continuing to serve our community. Thank you, and God bless you for your service to us.
Statistically, veterans commit suicide at a higher rate than the general population. Amongst the veterans, those that are homeless or are facing homelessness are more than twice as likely to commit suicide compared to veterans in stable housing. Together with the public housing authorities of Riverside and San Bernardino counties, along with community partners, the housing program at Loma Linda VA Medical Center currently houses over 950 veterans. Simply putting a roof over the veteran's head isn't all that's offered. Every veteran in the housing program has access to case management, mental health services from trained clinicians, employment and educational assistance from vocational development specialists, mentoring from peer support specialists, medical support from nursing staff, legal assistance programs, as well as access to housing navigation. If you're a veteran or know of a veteran that's homeless or potentially facing homelessness, please call the National VA Homeless Hotline at 1-877-4AID-VET. That's 1-877-424-3838, and your call will be routed to the nearest VA housing program. Homeless prevention is suicide prevention.
Well, hello everyone and good afternoon. My name is Michelle Martinez. We welcome you to the 8th Annual Mental Health Summit for the VA Loma Linda. We're here with the veterans that are serving on our panel today, and I want to introduce you to Stephen Osborne, U.S. Marine Corps, served from 2008 to 2012. Hello, Stephen.
How you doing?
Hi, good. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Anna, yeah, you bet. Anna Ruiz. Anna, is also a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, served from 2006 to 2010. Anna, how are you?
Good, I'm good. Thanks, Michelle. How are you?
Good, thank you for being here. And next we have our veteran, William Ashton. William was with the U.S. Navy. He served from 1970 to 1976. William, how are you today?
I'm good.
Great. Absolutely. Yeah, good to have all of you here today. And so the purpose of our panel is to share with you all in the public the beautiful miracle we call recovery for our veterans. Our veterans are faced with lots of challenges, and what we found is that recovery is possible. And so today we're going to introduce you to our 3 veterans and their journey and what that looked like for them. And so I'm going to ask them some questions. And so sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. So Stephen, I'm going to start with you, sir. What event or challenges in your past let you know it was time to seek help?
The events that led up to that led me to my path of recovery was in 2018. I knew that things were going wrong. As far as I couldn't hide it no more. It was becoming noticeable, not only to my family, but to my friends. And I was in so much denial that I just, I couldn't take it anymore. And then it was hopeless for me. So I was contemplating, but then I just decided I need to turn myself into the VA. That was my only route because I couldn't do it the other way.
And where did you first look for help?
To get well and to get my life back, and to stick around for my son. He's my main priority, and then I can't. It's not fair for me to do what I was doing.
Understood. And it takes a lot of courage to ask for that help.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Anna, what event or challenges for you let you know it was time to seek help?
I guess I found myself just in a dark place where I was constantly feeling bad, down, feeling hopeless. I found myself being housing insecure, and I just felt like everything was falling apart. And I confided in a friend where I let her know my experiences, and she was really the one who said, you know, maybe you should seek out help. And she was also seeking help for another issue, but she was just really the one to encourage me to do it. It made me feel like I wasn't alone.
Awesome. And where did you first seek help, Anna?
Well, I first looked at the resource she gave me. So it was a community help center in San Diego. So I went to them first, and then after that, I sought help from the VA.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm really glad that you're here and that you were able to share your story with us and let us know that you made a big decision that day that probably, I mean, obviously it's changed the course of your life forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, William, what event or challenges in your past let you know it was time to seek help?
Well, I was homeless at the time. Lost my job in '91, and I started living on the streets. My wife had thrown me out, and I started doing drugs, and that was I ended up moving to Ohio, and I thought my girlfriend had told me that maybe I should get in touch with the VA because of my problems, but I was basically on drugs, and I knew I needed some help.
Outstanding. Where did you first seek help, William?
Okay, that would be the VA hospital in Chillicothe, Ohio. I spent actually close to 9 months there as an inpatient, and worked in or used the tools they had for therapy, and but I was still drinking, and I was still using still using marijuana, at the time, so I wasn't ready to commit to recovery yet.
So you had started down the path, though. What prevented you from getting the help sooner? What do you think? Can you name some or think of what some of the barriers were at the time?
The barrier was I didn't know that I could get help from the VA. I had never contacted the VA or been aware that I had any benefits, or I just didn't know. I mean, it wasn't until my girlfriend actually took me to a VA hospital that I found out what my benefits could be.
Incredible. And you've been in the VA system for some time now?
Yeah, actually, I've been in the VA since 1994, and I continue with the VA on a constant basis. I get all my medical and all my mental health from them.
Outstanding. And William, I noticed with your years of service, you are a Vietnam era veteran.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. Thank you for your service. Absolutely.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to transition back to Stephen. Stephen, what prevented you or stopped you from getting help sooner?
Almost the same answer. I got out in 2012. I've been in the VA system since 2014, actually. And since I was never taught anything while I was in service, I came out not having any type of relation or any type of communication with the VA. And so I just thought that I'm just fine and there's nothing wrong with me. And then little by little, everything started hitting, and I wasn't that tough, hard veteran like everybody else. There was something wrong. And that's what kept me from going to the VA, was being somewhat clueless, but also scared of stigma and not knowing where to start. There's so many ways to get into the VA, or so many avenues and corners you have to have, and I didn't know where to start. There was so many different advices that I was getting.
I see. Okay. What kind of programs or resources and support do you have today for your recovery?
Well, today I'm grateful with the VA that it's really changing my life that I got myself into treatment for substance abuse. I went into this program called STAR, Substance Treatment and Recovery. And from day one, that program has done nothing but fixed and molded everything that was wrong with me, and sort of like a mental boot camp. And it really opens your eyes on who you are and why you use, and what else is going on besides using. What's the pain, and what's the pain inside for the reason why you use. Okay.
What advice, if any, what advice would you give to a veteran who is currently having challenges in substance abuse? What would you say to them?
What I would say is, don't be a statistic. Grab that phone and get a hold of somebody, because though you may feel like you're all alone, you're not. There's so many of us that are scared to show any type of weakness, but it's not weakness to seek help. I learned that, and it took me years to find that out. Because we're not victims, we're victors. So that's the way I look at it. We made it. We should be proud of that, and do it for those who ain't here. We should be there. We should be that voice for those who ain't here, and that's what I say. Grab the phone, get help. Whatever kind of help you can get.
Love it. Love it. That's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. You guys are the evidence that recovery is possible. You really are. So thank you, Stephen. Anna, what prevented you or stopped you from getting help sooner, do you think?
There were a lot of things. So I think the longest time I blamed myself for what happened to me. I felt like it was my fault, and therefore my response to it was just to ignore it. I thought that if I could just ignore the problem and the intrusive thoughts and what had occurred to me, that it would just go away, and but that doesn't work. So I'd have anxiety or panic attacks and things of that nature. But so then I guess I also started to learn, that it wasn't my fault. I also, another barrier was just like that. I was like, this is not what PTSD looks like. I have all my limbs and I'm a female and like, I just don't fit the profile. So like, there can't be anything wrong with me. I also felt like I was very high achieving. Like I did a lot of things. So I was like, I'm fine. Like I've made it this far. I've gotten through school. I've done this and that. There couldn't be anything wrong with me. So I just kept denying it, pushing it, away. Like I got this. I have control of this. But it was, really other people pointing out that, getting help and showing symptoms doesn't always look the same. It's not going to look the same for everybody. So I think that was really helpful in opening my eyes.
Outstanding. Wow, thank you. Tell me, Anna, what does your recovery look like today for you?
Today I'm still very engaged with the vet center. I think I found like refuge there because it helped me navigate the VA. Sometimes I feel like the VA can be overwhelming for some people, or just paperwork and bureaucracies and telling whenever I do like an intake, I felt like triggered every time, like having to retell the story over and over, right, to a new person. So I feel like they both work like together and are supportive for me to be able to navigate it, because there have been times where I've just felt so overwhelmed navigating the VA system and felt like I've had panic attacks just filling out paperwork and feeling like I don't want to go through this anymore. Like this is exhausting. But at the end of the day, I feel like my counselor was like, what do you have to lose? Like she kind of helped me see it in a different way and keep pushing forward. So that's what my recovery looks like.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Thank you for your strength. Thank you for your consistency, your drive, and your intention, to keep pushing through what was uncomfortable for you. So yeah. I'm glad you're here to tell us about that today,
Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, William, I want to ask you, what does your recovery look like today? What programs or resources or groups do you have that support your recovery today?
I'm still involved with AA, although right now it's online. It's kind of frustrating. I have an outside therapist through the CARE Act that I see once a week, and I have this group right here. Plus, I have a fantastic circle of friends who always have my back, and it's been an interesting thing because I never had that when I was doing drugs. I didn't have friends. I had acquaintances who might rip me off in like 2 minutes.
Yes, sir, no doubt. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing with us what works for you. What advice, or not advice, but where do you see your recovery taking you in the future? What does that look like for you? Maybe employment, relationship goals, personal achievements you strive to do?
Well, I'm heavily involved in a lot of different veteran programs throughout the county, and I'm even friends with Mark Giacano, who is the he's the Veterans Affairs Administrator. So I can usually find out information and get things done, and I'm on the Veterans Task Force in Riverside County, or Riverside City, I should say. There's just a lot of different programs that I'm involved with. You offered me a chance to be on that Play Hill Veteran Suicide Prevention Program, so I'm going to keep coordinating with that. And I'm also in the American Legion. I was commander at the American Legion for 3 years. I stepped down to be chaplain right now because of all my other commitments, but that's a possibility. I may become commander once again. I mean, I have a future. As far as relationships, I don't, right now I'm not in a relationship. It's not that I don't want to be in a relationship, it's just that sometimes I feel like that I'm afraid that I would put too much on somebody with all the mental issues that I have to go through, usually on a daily or weekly basis.
Well, you surely keep yourself very busy, it seems. Yeah. And, you know, thank you for your continued service to us veterans. You know, to be a part of that with Congressman Takano, to be involved in your community like that takes a lot of commitment, takes a lot of time. And we appreciate your continued service. So thank you for what you're doing in your community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Stephen, hi. Checking in back in with you. Wanted to know if you could tell us what your program of recovery looks like today.
Well, with my recovery right now, it's a long process. It's definitely not going to be overnight. I have been in for a good amount of time now, but there's still a long way to go. And the process is the end. My main priority is to get sober first, take care of myself, be a better father to my son, because I didn't have my father growing up. So that was pretty rough for me growing up and having to, you know, learn a lot of things on my own that a father's supposed to teach his son. I don't want that for my son, so I definitely want to stick around, and I'm gonna stick around. Possibly get back into the workforce, because it's been a good amount of time that I've been out of the workforce, but my recovery comes first, and you know, hopefully the employment that I would get will be meaningful, and not only for myself but meaningful to others, because that was one of the biggest things that caused a lot of my anxiety and my stress, was the fact that it's hard to work with people who don't have the same mindset as you, and working into a job that has no meaning, where you feel like you're just rotting away, deteriorating. So definitely, if I can work with veterans, that'll be fantastic. That'll be the icing on the cake. But who knows? Right now, I'm just gonna let the universe take its place, and just stay present, be grounded, not worry about tomorrow. That's just a thought, but I'm not expecting. I'm not having no expectations, but just being in the now.
That's great advice for any of us. But definitely in your recovery, you know, staying in the now, you can always future trip about what's going to happen tomorrow, right? We can always try to put ourselves there. But it says a lot about your character. And I think you've come a long way in your recovery to be able to say those things today, and you sound content, Stephen. You sound content where you're at. And I know you're striving to do more, but you have your head on. I can tell that you're going to go where you want to go in life. You're going to get that job that works with veterans. I have no doubt in my mind that you'll be doing that in the future. I'm not trying to future trip or predict the future, but I can say, I can imagine that you will be working with our country's veterans. So yeah. I'm putting that out there into the future for you. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Anna, tell us about where do you see your recovery taking you in the future? Have you set new goals, new, things that you want to do now that you have a handle on your recovery?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to definitely continue doing I'm also doing telecare therapy. So sticking to that, because I know in the past I've been like, when I'm doing well and I'm doing fine, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing in therapy? I'm fine. Like, I don't need this. And I'll talk myself out of it. But really sticking to it, because I know this is not like I go to therapy or do the teletherapy and then I'm done and then I'm good, because I'm still going to have my lows, and it just like life is just full of ups and downs. So definitely sticking to that. Right now, just like also I just graduated in June with my master's, so I'm on the job hunt. So I just want and I don't know what I got myself into with with the pandemic, and I don't know what the job market is like right now. So I'm trying to stay positive, just consistently keep applying to jobs. I do have an interview tomorrow, so that's good news. So I don't know. I'm hopeful about the type of positions and work that I'll be doing. Mostly, I'd like to stick to government work or any type of research. So I don't know. I'm excited for what's to come.
That is so amazing. How exciting for you. Congratulations on your master's. That's quite an accomplishment. Absolutely. Took a lot of hard work, I know, right? And you probably thought, I don't know if I'm ever going to arrive, but you've arrived, sister. Good job. So congratulations and best of luck and good wishes to you on your journey with employment. You're a Marine. What more could they ask for, right? Yeah. So thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, thanks. You bet. So, William, I want to know, you've been in recovery for quite a long time, but what advice would you give to that newcomer, that person that hasn't yet sought treatment and they're in their disease? What would you say to them? What kind of advice would you give them?
I think the hardest thing to do when you're in your disease is to ask for help. I mean, they talk about reaching your bottom, and when you do reach your bottom, you either check out or check in, and the best thing to do is to check in, is to find services. A lot of veterans do not know that they are eligible for VA services, and that there is so much out there that the veterans can get, and you don't have to go to the VA necessarily. There are service organizations, the American Legion, the VFW, AMVETS, Disabled American Veterans, and other organizations that have service officers in their organizations. And you can go to these, places and talk with the service officer. They can get you signed up with the VA. They can get you tagged in. They'll help you fill out the paperwork. They'll do most of the groundwork for you so that you don't have to be burdened with that. I know a lot of people don't understand, there is help out there. You can go to the Veteran Service Office in your city or state and get someone to help you fill out all that paperwork. They'll sit there, you just give them the information, they'll type it in, and you don't have to go through all this writing and trying to figure out all the things that run through your head, because it's really hard sometimes when you're in the disease to figure out which way to go. You're chasing your next fix, or you're chasing your next hit, or you're chasing you're chasing the drug, and you're not taking care of yourself. So you just if you could figure out and get the information from these organizations or from the VA itself, that would be the way to go. And most of us don't realize we have a problem when we do have a problem. And when we finally do realize we have a problem, it's hard to deal with. And you just got to move forward. That's the hardest thing, is move forward and ask for help, because we're veterans. We don't ask for help. We don't surrender. We don't ask for help. We don't do anything. But if you're struggling out there, then you really have to do those steps in order to get some help.
Outstanding, William. Thank you. That is a great answer. The service organizations have the service officers who are volunteers most of the time, unless they're paid by the organization. William spoke to our county veteran affairs offices. CalVet is another resource in California, but your local county veteran affairs office has a staff full of folks that are working for us, basically. So they, the service officers are, they're at no charge to start your benefits, talk to you about your benefits, explain your benefits, let you apply for your benefits, to answer all those questions. So Another great resource that I always send our veterans to is va.gov, the VA website. It's a great place. You can actually apply for education benefits and medical benefits right there on the website. COVID has created unique opportunities for us to serve our veterans now through the service organizations, the County Veteran Affairs Office, and the internet, va.gov website. So I want to thank our participants today in our panel, Stephen, Anna, William. Thank you guys so much. I'm wishing you so much in your futures, many blessings to you. Thank you for being the veterans that you are, for asking for help, for being an example, letting others know that recovery is possible, that to ask for help is okay. I know we're strong and we like to be very independent, but it is okay to ask for help. Absolutely. And you guys are the evidence. So thank you for continued support for yourself and getting the work done, putting in the effort, and being a beacon of hope. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.